Ladies and gentlemen, full disclosure, I'm not a big fan of Don Cherry. I find some of his attitudes and some of his right wing leanings not really Canadian or even understandable from a political standpoint. But he's entitled to his opinion. We're not talking politics today. We're talking about how in the fuck did he end up with the Colorado Rockies after so many successful seasons with the Boston Bruins? Now, you have to give a little bit of background how he ended up in Colorado. He was coaching in Rochester, a very successful minor league team for years, but was promoted to the NHL as head coach of the Bruins for the '75 season. And this is what I call what they call the last of the non-championship dynasty era of the Bruins. The Bruins from '75 to the time he was fired were one of the best teams ever in sports history to not win a championship. Loaded with talent, with stars, semi-stars, good fan base, good farm system. They really became Canada's fourth team at the time. Now, the Bruins were coming off a successful run of 2 Stanley Cups and 3 first-place finishes, and including the 1772 Cups. But after Cherry's first season as coach, the team would see the exit of superstars Bobby Orr, who signed with Chicago after Alan Eagleson lied to him about a new contract with Boston, where Orr would have owned part of the team, and a trade of Phil Esposito to the Rangers. Now, Cherry quickly developed a reputation for being an eccentric, flamboyant coach who strongly encouraged physical play among his players. According to Cherry, he molded the Bruins' playing style after that of his beloved dog Blue, a feisty bull terrier. While the team had been known for Orr and Esposito, who were highly regarded skaters, the '76 Bruins started the season in a brief slump, in part due to Orr's knee injury that saw him play only 10 contests. Plus, Orr would become a free agent at the end of the season. Cherry made the team with enforcers and grinders, which became known as the Lunch Pail Gang, or Lunch Pail AC, and the Big Bad Bruins, with Esposito and Carol Vadnais being traded to the Rangers for Brad Park and John Martel, as Esposito heavily disagreed with Cherry's coaching, including having this disinclination to back check. So the Rangers, Stan Johnson, Wensick, Terry O'Reilly, Mike Milbury, Rick Smith, Doak was brought back, toughness on the back end, toughness on the front end, Peter McNabb, Ricky Middleton came over from the Rangers, one of my favorite players with the Bruins. Middleton once told me in an interview I did with him in 2010 that Boston was, like I said, a very close team. And this was almost an all-Canadian team, by the way. So you look at that, that's why they were so popular in my nation. Now, this approach of balance over brilliance re-injuvenated the Bruins, in part particularly the careers of Park and Rattel, which I think were kind of on a burnout after the debacle in '72, where Park and Rattel were involved with the gag line controversy and the fact Park was being what do you call, not say benched by Harry Sendon, but he didn't get enough playing time in '72. They continued to be the NHL's best teams during the latter half of the '70s, and in this run, they captured Adams' division title 4 straight seasons, from '76 through '79, with Cherry winning the Jack Adams Award as NHL Coach of the Year for the '75 season. In the '78 campaign, he coached the Bruins team to a NHL record of 11 players with 20 goals or more in a single squad, and a lot of those players didn't peak like that again. So '78, to me, was the best season for Boston. Unfortunately, they lost to Montreal in the finals, where they came back from 2-0 down, but tough losses in Game 5 and Game 6 really put Cherry on the firing block. Now, the Bruins in this era were able to defeat the Flyers twice in the playoffs under Cherry's tenure. The Bruins made the Stanley Cup Finals twice, both teams at times losing their arch rivals, the Habs. '77 lost 4 straight. '78 again, tough loss in Game 2 in overtime, and that summed up the series for the Big Bad Bruins. Now, the Canadians only had 2 really big rivals at the time. It was the Islanders and the Bruins. And the late '70s Canadians, again, one of the most dominant teams in NHL history, with 3 of their 8 regular season losses in '77 came against the Bruins, so the Bruins could handle them. But and don't forget, Montreal only lost 1 home game after Christmas, and I think it was to the Bruins. In the '79 semifinal playoff series against the Habs, Cherry's Bruins pushed the series to the limit, but they were undone by a late penalty in the 7th game, where too many men on the ice. People say it was Mark Ott. People say Rick Middleton didn't want to say, or in the words of Middleton, they said read Marcotte's book. A very, very good game. You have to look at it on YouTube. Boston was leading 3-1 and 4-3 late. Cashman and Milton doing both the scoring, but unfortunately was not meant to be. Lafleur on a feed for Lemaire scored against Gilbert with less than 80 seconds left, 70 seconds left. And of course, Lambert in overtime and a set play between Houle and Tremblay. Now, again, talking about that, in this scenario, they were up by a goal with less than 3 minutes left in the contest, and the Bruins were called for having too many men on the ice, which he blamed on himself, Cherry said, saying later that the guy couldn't have heard me yell. I grabbed 2 other guys trying to go over the boards, that it would have made 8 on the ice. Now, I watched the game live. There were 7 players I saw, and it looked to be, you know, when somebody is skating off, like what happened at the World Women's Championship with the player for the U.S. was skating off and he hit one of her teammates. This is what happened here. Again, Lafleur scored a tying goal on the power play, one of the greatest snapshots in NHL history, and ultimately the Canadians won the game in overtime. Now, Cherry was on the outs even before that contest, so we knew if he wasn't going to win, something was going to happen. Now, they bet the Rangers for the 4th straight Cup title in the next series, losing the first game against Espo and company, but the Montreal won 4 straight. Now, Cherry, who had an uneasy relationship with Bruins GM Harry Sinden, who was the head coach in '72, was eventually fired by the Bruins afterward. Don't really know why he was fired. It would be better to keep him on, but I think he wanted some new blood, and certain players would not come to Boston if Cherry was there. So this is what happened, and I don't know exactly if this was his penance for the too many men in the ice. He went on the next year to coach the Colorado Rockies in the 1980 season. Now, the CBC TV movie with the Don Cherry situation can tell you better, but that was a complete fucking nightmare for Don Cherry. And like I said, I don't like the guy, but I wouldn't wish that my worst enemy. Colorado 1980 were terrible. Now, under his tenure, the Rockies adopted a motto, come to the fights and watch a Rockies game break out, and the slogan could be seen on billboards all over Denver throughout the season. However, the Colorado Rockies had some talent, but they weren't fighters. They were basically Barry Beck and a bunch of filler. Mostly, there was 5 or 6 good players. The goaltending was terrible, and we'll get that in a second. Now, however, Cherry later admitted his outspokenness and feuding with Rockies GM Ray Miron, we used to call him Ray Moron back in the day, did not endear Cherry to management. While Cherry did much to motivate the players, goaltending was still the team's weakness, as Miro refused to replace Hardy Astrom, a call over in the Yuri Sierra mold from Europe. Hardy Astrom probably one of the worst Swedish imports from the team Sweden program ever. Cherry dubbed him the Swedish Sieve. Cherry recalled one game where his players had taken 10 shots on goal without scoring, but Astrom then conceded a goal from the opponent's first shot and so was yanked from the net. Put it this way, he couldn't stop a fly from landing on his shoulder. You probably miss it. So now, in a late season game in Chicago, the Blackhawks scored the game-winning goal while Mike McEwen, a favorite of the Rockies owner and probably one of the most overrated NHL players ever, was on the ice. When McEwen returned to the bench, Cherry grabbed him by the jersey and shook him. McEwen left the team for several days and did not return until after meeting with Miro and the club's owners. Cherry's belief, stated later, was that the owners had promised McEwen that Cherry would be fired after the season. Now, the Rockies finished with a league-worst 1948-13 record. You can imagine what they would have been without Cherry, and the worst single-season mark of Cherry's coaching career. He was fired 6 weeks after the season ended. So, that Colorado 79-80 season, again, 6th place in the spiked division, and as bad as they are. Now, the captain that year was Mike Christie. They did good in the draft, actually, that year. They got Rob Ramage in the draft. But that division wasn't the strongest in the NHL. Chicago won with only 87 points. So you can imagine to play another division. They only scored 234 goals, but the goaltending, again, almost 4 a game. Now, what's kind of ironic of Colorado that season, ladies and gentlemen, the first, October, November was just a shit show. They lost 13 games in the first 2 months of the season. They barely squeaked out a 4-1 win against Winnipeg on October 20th for the first of the season. Knocked off the Rangers November 3rd. Knocked off the Sabres November 11th. But and again, 4, 12 and 3, and up until November 3rd, 23rd, and 5, 13 and 3 by the end of the month. And they weren't giving up anything but 7-4 losses. Now, the second half of the season was just as terrible. And between February 27th and April 6th, get this, they only won 3 games. So you do the rough amount of that. There were 16, 35, and 10 on February 27th, and only won 3 games, lost 13, tied 3. And it was getting to a point where everybody was wondering if Lanny McDonald needed to be there that year. Now, he coached a team. He had Rennie Robert and Lanny McDonald, Jack Valiquette. He had some former people. You know, McDonald was pretty good. He was only minus 15. But Rennie Robert, my God, he went from the French Connection 2 years before to the bowels of Colorado. They had some, like I said, Lucien Deblois had a good season here with 24 goals. But Wilf Paymon again to trade. Christie was there, a very solid defenseman. But he had a lot of cast-offs. You had Don Selesky was there for a while. Bobby Schmatz, a young Trevor Johansson. Nick Beverly, of all people, who was way past his prime. Bobby Sheen, the speed was gone. But he ended up with the Rangers the year before. And a young Barry Beck was there as well. Walt Paquetny. So it was a combination of old players. Don Ashby was there for a while as well. But let's look at the Hardy Astrom numbers. 927-6 and 375 goals against average. And Michel Plast, the former Montreal Canadian and Pittsburgh Penguin, was there. So I mean, it was it was a bummer. But I know in Boston, it's been 45 years since Cherry's been head coach, and he's still legendary in Boston. For a lot of the Boston fans, you got Boston, Toronto going on. The spirit of Don Cherry is around that team all the time. When you see Marchand, different players through the years, the strength of the hard work ethic of Boston all comes with Don Cherry. Because at one point, the Boston Bruins were not the big bad Bruins. They were like the Montreal Canadian version of the Bruins. But like, if you go on my podcast here, I got a few podcasts on the Jonathan Pierre Bouchard fight. That summed up Boston. Boston was the small man in the block. There was a bully at the bar, and the small man at the bar would kick the living shit. Look at John Winsing when he tried to take on the bench. The early 80s Bruins were not the same without Don Cherry. No offense. I mean, it ended up, former Bruins being coaches and stuff like that. But I learned a lot talking to Terry O'Reilly and Rick Milton, Rick Smith at an alumni game in 2010 in Boston. What it really meant to be a Boston Bruin. You got to hear it from the source. I was very proud to see the Boston Bruins at their best, and I'm sad they lost to Montreal. But here's the deal: the 1974 Bruins were not like the same thing as the 77 Bruins. The 77 Bruins was more of a squad. So they're the best number 2 team in sports in major pro sports in the 1970s. They should have won some cups. They could easily won in 78 and 79, but like I said, was it Cherry's fault? No. It just happened that Montreal had enough of a left in the tank. It's like 2 sports cars going down the highway, 150 miles an hour, and the car on the right hits a pebble and busts a tire. Like I said, it wasn't anybody's fault that Boston lost. If anything, 78 they had everything going. But game 2, I mean, if you watch that, the how Guilford scored in overtime, and what really hurt Boston, I think, was a comeback in game 4 where Lafleur had scored late to put in overtime, and Bobby did score. But like I said, Boston only had too much energy, and Cashman was older, and maybe certain key players that should have stayed. What they should have done, and this is my personal opinion, you should have traded Esposito. You should never have traded Carol Vadnais, because he brought in Dickie Redmond and a few people later. I think you should have saved Vadnais. Vadnais would have done very well being a former Montreal Canadian. But Don Cherry as a personality, again, not my cup of tea. If I talk politics with him, I would have nothing in common. But as a coach, he was dedicated to everybody. And Coach's Corner and all that, he like the lunch pail people of Canada. Most of them are right wingers, but that's lunch pail people. You got to respect that, because the people that take that lunch pail to go to work, they're some of the hardest working people in Canada. And with Don Cherry, you had to be the lunch pail. But imagine being sent to Colorado. You're at the height, And he became an announcer for CBC for a while there when Colorado didn't work out, which led to Coach's Corner. But you have a chance to see that 4-hour miniseries on Cherry. I think there's a third movie too as well. It's quite interesting, like the incidents with Eddie Shore and being in the minors. His connections with Gump Worsley and different stuff like that. It's amazing. And I feel bad for his wife, because Rubber used to do the various commercials through the years, and Don Cherry's wife would be part of it. I mean, But, his brother was a good player too, so it runs in the family. Hockey runs in the family. So, ladies and gentlemen, good luck with the playoffs tonight. I figured Toronto's going to lose again, but what do I know? Because I thought John Schneider would be fired as Blue Jay manager by last week, but we're still waiting on that. So that could be a next podcast. Just remember, ladies and gentlemen, if you're a Boston Bruins fan, the YouTubes are there. Go back in the day and watch the Boston Bruins teams, even into the late, the early 80s, to see the impact. You look at how Ricky Middleton improved, and Terry O'Reilly improved under Cherry, and Marcotte, and John Wensick. Stan Johnson, one of the best Aboriginal players, athletes of all time, by the way. Not just any sport, but he's a tremendous. Stan Johnson's a legend on my channel, because people come in. He's number one, by the way, he's the number one subject on my channel. People from across the world have come onto my YouTube to watch my Stan Johnson podcast, because he knows how much he's respected within the channel. So thank you, Stan Johnson, for being a hero of the Governor's channel. We really appreciate you. And I've met you before, like in 2010. Fine gentleman. Brad Park as well. Tremendous. So, ladies and gentlemen, have a good weekend. Don't forget Mother's Day is coming up. Don't forget Mums. And do me a favor, ladies and gentlemen, if you're in Canada, go to Tim Hortons and get the dual packs. We got the new packs in Canada about, competing players and rivals and brothers. Probably the set of the year. Only 3 packs for $1.50, but it's well worth it. Treat yourself. Because in Canada, Upper Deck is still sports card king. In the States, it's pretty well gone. Thanks for listening. Bye.